Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, again, a very important topic that we have chosen to talk about is about the Indian warmongering. It's about the Indian support towards terrorism in Pakistan. And we all know, and we have presented so many dossiers to the right authorities to look into them. Basically, India wants this region, in particular Pakistan and Afghanistan, to be destabilized. This is what suits them. This is what exactly they want in that region. Now, as long as the things are settling down, they're opposing the Afghan regime of the Taliban. They're also trying their level best to bring in terrorism at a very higher level inside Pakistan. And look at the latest, this wave of terrorism in Pakistan, where we have lost so many soldiers, especially the men in uniform were the targets. Or you talk about the CPEC in general, that is again another target. Now, what exactly do they want? According to our special representative and the ambassador in the United Nations, Munir Akram Saab, he says that India has always nuclearized the Indian Ocean. Now, ever since we have heard about this concept of Quad, or lately the AUKUS, and then the development that took place, if you remember, for the first time, the Quad meeting was held in the United Nations, where everyone, all the concerned members were there. AUKUS was earlier announced. And the kind of aim and objective that the Americans have is basically to counter China and its allies also. So where do we fit in? Where do we stand? That is something pretty tricky, and one should understand. Well, as far as Pakistan is concerned, Munir Akram Saab further stated that Pakistan will continue with the full spectrum deterrence. This is a very clear-cut message. And lately there was another very interesting incident that happened on the line of actual control, and that is between China and the Indian state. How is it going to affect the region? Again, something very important to ponder upon. And then when we talk about these statements coming from China, normally they used to give very, I would say, docile statements. You know, they would always talk between the lines, but recently, if you look at the statements coming from the Chinese spokespeople, you will understand one thing, that they are openly now challenging the aggression of the Americans or its allies. And when it comes to India, I think whatever has happened, but the Chinese, they do understand that what sort of a threat is posed by the Indians. Now, to talk about this, before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that.
In the post-Cold War world, all the developed and developing states started giving weightage to non-military threats and human security in their respective national security premises. The world states started to realize that military might in traditional power-oriented political moves are not the only options to become a prominent player in the arena of international relations. This changing approach towards the power and security facets, however, remained an unacceptable reality for India, who always remained obsessed with being a hegemon in South Asia. Concurrence of India's hegemonic lust and Hindutva political orientation in two consecutive tenures of Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister of India not only proved to be a bolstering threat for the minorities of India, but also disrupted the restive peace with its neighboring countries, including Pakistan and China. The tenure of Prime Minister Narendra Modi proved to be a failure regarding the implementation of his pledged policies, including neighborhood first and strengthening of regionalism. The reason behind his failure can be attributed to the illusionary perspective of India that the region can be secured and strengthened without mending its ties with its nuclear-equipped neighbors, including Pakistan and China, through appropriate diplomatic means. These concerns regarding India becoming a regional security threat were raised by Pakistan's Ambassador Munir Akram on 4th October 2021 while addressing the General Assembly's First Committee, which deals with disarmament and international security matters. He drew the committee's attention to India's Hindutva regime and respective brutal reign of terror and oppression on Kashmiri people, state-sponsored terrorism and disinformation campaigns against Pakistan. He warned that in case of any security threat from India, Pakistan will preserve its full-spectrum deterrence to counter any potential Indian aggression. He said that India spent $73 billion in the realm of massive militarization and nuclearization of the Indian Ocean in the year 2020. India, on the other hand, is on the verge of another confrontation with China as Chinese foreign Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying recently said that Indian side is pursuing a forward policy and had illegally crossed the line of actual control to encroach on China's territory. However, India rebuked China's blame and said that China is deploying a large number of troops and armaments along the line of actual control.
Now, to talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Brigadier Retired Saeed Nazir Saab, Senior Analyst in our studio. So, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you indeed.
And on Skype from India, we have Mandeep Singh Bajwa Saab. He's a Senior Journalist. Bajwa Saab, pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And we have with us Uqab Malik Saab. Dr. Saab is an expert on foreign affairs. Thank you so much, Dr. Uqab, for your time. So, pleasure to have both of you gentlemen in our program. Now, let me start off from you, Brigadier Saeed. Now, when we say that India is a threat for the peace and prosperity of the region, and now perhaps on the behest of the Americans, they believe that they can take on China and perhaps take on Pakistan at the same time. This is what General Bipin Rawat, the head of their defense when he was the Chief of Army Staff, used to say also. Now, sir, latest development that include the Quad element, or perhaps the AUKUS now. AUKUS is a separate chapter, we'll come to that because that has got nothing to do with India. But at some stage, sir, when we see Quad, and especially the meeting that was recently held in United Nations, Chian, when they went and met the President of America, and they had a very comprehensive meeting out there. Now it seems, sir, that there is a clear-cut division. Perhaps I will definitely be talking to you about the clash of civilizations, but currently, sir, do you believe that the kind of support, whether it's coming in from France or Britain or United States of America or Japan or Australia or otherwise, sir, for the Indians, and especially in the context of the military, do you think, sir, they'll be able to take on China? Because on the Independence Day of Chinese Taipei, which the world call Taiwan, sir, about more than 5 dozen jets flew all around the area, and that was the day of their independence. So what I'm saying is that the Chinese, they were very mellow, they were very docile. No, sir, it's a different China altogether. Your take.
Thank you indeed. It's a big question, and there are so many dimensions to it. But at the same time, once we analyze the history of India, it was at loggerhead with Pakistan once Bangladesh was created through the Mughni Bahni, which was supported by the Modi mindset, and he clearly said it that yes, we did it. Then goes to the insurgency which they brought in Sri Lanka, and 23 years they were fighting against the Tamils, and Tamils, of course, whose childs they were, and actually finally they were to lose their leader again at the hands of the same very outfit which they were feeding. And third is of course the small states like Bhutan and Sikkim, and the way they are, Nepal, the way they are treating them. Fourth is China. Of course, Pakistan is their arch enemy, but China, once they used to say China in the bye-bye, and now the way this belligerence has come to the line of actual control. It was not only Doklam, now it has come to the Ladakh, and in Ladakh, India has moved almost more than a division of forces, and beside that, the Daulat Beg village, which has been almost developed to a sort of brigade-size force, besides the air-landing strips and all sort of offensive weaponry placed there. So all these speaks that probably on the behest of their masters or their supporters, or the way the bulwark is being created against China. You are talking of two-front war. They used to talk of 2.5 front war, because they were including the Kashmiris as well. So if Bipin, who is fighting against, their generals are fighting on this particular issue, that whether Air Force is a supporting arm or a fighting arm, this row is between the army and between the Air Force. So what to talk of their strategic thought and the way they want to say that we will be
I recently, in fact, saw an interview of their air chief, and he was also, talking about bringing in new military power and, getting rid of the obsolete weaponry.
And then
same as the case. And then, now they need to, and perhaps they are working on the new narrative on the new sort of, the way they have to deal with the regional players, I would say.
Yeah.
So a lot is happening on that front.
So
that's for
actually,
sure.
China is a sort of bogey created by all these powers, and now India is put on the forefront, including the Quad.
Sir, the Americans
so
have never ever fought a war on their soil
them
except for the Independence War, remember, sir?
Yeah.
And there were just 2 attacks that took place, sir. One was 9/11, a very dubious kind of
Yeah,
incident. So the case was the Pearl Harbor, in order to achieve the, the supremacy
Exactly.
over the world, sir, after bombing Japan. Now, sir, if you allow me, I'll bring in Mandeep Singh Bajwa Saab. Now, Bajwa Saab, honestly speaking, when we talk about neighbors, I've been to India once, and honestly, I really liked India. And I was in Delhi, and obviously we couldn't walk that freely because there were a lot of intelligence people all over the hotel and everything there. But what I'm saying is that I really felt as if, everything was so similar. So this is the kind of gesture a normal Pakistani would have about the Indians. Because we grew up watching the Indian movies and listening to their songs and everything, we all thought that, we eat the same food, we have similar ways of life. I mean, so many identical features. But, sir, recently, ever since Narendra Modi got into power, sir, this RSS phenomena, and on top of this extremist agenda that the government of RSS or BJP is following, sir, that has not only hurt the Muslims living in India, sir, but the minorities. And honestly speaking, sir, India is no more a democratic state, sir. It is an authoritative kind of a state where one set of rules that are being applied on everyone, and especially after the CAA and also the abrogation of the Article 370 in Kashmir, sir, things have really taken a very different twist and turn during the last 2 years. Where is this region heading, sir? How do you see this entire situation unfolding in the future? Your take.
Well, there are difficulties. I mean, there are problems in India. There are, there are vast political differences between the opposition and the ruling party. Civil society is up in arms on many issues. The ruling party also have their own share of grievances, many of them imaginary or self-created. But talking of the subcontinent, about South Asia as a whole, I'm quite optimistic. I mean, there's been a ceasefire along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, which has held. And there's been no major incident between the two countries, between India and Pakistan, for the last, more than a year. And, there is room for optimism. I mean, of course, these pinpricks, these irritants, and other problems will always be there. I mean, between the best of countries, I mean, look at the row going on between France, Australia, and the US, who were closest of allies, not just friends or partners, they're allies. So these problems will remain. I mean, you can't just wish them away. But otherwise, I find that there is room for optimism. I mean, we haven't had any major incident or any big problem for the last year or so. And I think as time goes by, and depending on the goodwill between the two countries, and particularly the governments on both sides, and their strategic interests, whatever they feel is best for them in the future, I think we can certainly move forward towards a common agenda. In saying, I mean, look at the, I give you the case of France and Germany. I mean, who could have been greater enemies in both countries? I mean, twice in 25 years, within a quarter of a century, France was occupied by the Germans. I mean, wholly in during the Second World War, and to a large extent in the First World War, and murderous hatred between the two countries. And now France and Germany have a joint army formation. So I think there is room for optimism, and I don't think that current sort of strident right-wing, the shrill campaign run by the right wing will last very long. I mean, elections are due in 3 years' time, and certainly there could be a change. and a new government could come in. And on the whole, I'm optimistic that
that's great to be optimistic, sir. I think hope is perhaps the best thing one can even think of. But interestingly, sir, you gave the example of Germany and France. But these two countries, they have fought for so long, sir. And you know, once this whole phenomena of war that existed in Europe, that moved out of Europe at some stage. Countries did realize after whatever happened during the First World War and then after the Second World War. But now the question is, sir, do you think that after whatever has happened in 1940s, now India being the second largest in the population, spending almost 75 billion a year on their defense, being a poor country, that is your internal issue perhaps. But our concern, primarily when we talk about Pakistan, sir, is that India is a nuclear power, so are we, so is China. It's a very complicated region. We are all members of SCO where there are 4 nuclear powered countries. And then at the same time, when we say that India is being prepared by the Western world to counter China. I'll just give you one example, sir. Whatever happened in Afghanistan and the way the Americans literally rushed out of that place, they escaped perhaps. I mean, so much has been written and has been shown on the television screens that, you know, we are all witness to it. Do you still believe that America can be trusted against the kind of odds which we have in the region, sir? And especially when the Indians are being supported militarily by the French, by the Americans, perhaps by so many other countries. And now the shift is towards the West. But sir, we all understand about the fault lines of India, about the issues that still prevail, whether you talk about the chicken neck and the east of that part, or you talk about Khalistan, or you talk about the extreme south, the Tamil area, you talk about Kashmir, I mean Nagaland, I mean there is a long list. Do you think, sir, such an adventure would be pretty challenging for the Indians, sir, even if there is a Cold War-like situation?
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir. Bajwa sir. Yes,
well,
Bajwa sir.
There, of course, there are a lot of worries and the thing. And well, as you pointed out, the Americans left Afghanistan in a hurry. One doesn't know. What their game plan is, and there could be something behind it. Let's see what unfolds in the future. The Americans are known to keep their cards close to their chests, and let's see what comes out in the future. And as for China, well, you know, China is in a big hurry, and you know, expansionism is their current motto, and you know, they're expanding into the Indian Ocean, you know, towards big footprint in Africa and in the Middle East also. And that is the reason for worry for the entire region, because you know, the Chinese are not exactly benign sort of interlopers or whatever, and wherever they go, they do create discord. I mean, just look at it. I mean, I think possibly Pakistan is the only one of its neighbors with which China does not have a territorial dispute, and they've made no attempt whatsoever in the last 60 years to solve any of the territorial issues, whether it was Vietnam or you know, with Myanmar, particularly with India, with Russia. And they've been, I mean, the war with Vietnam in '79, clashes with Russia in the Soviet Union at that time in '69, war with India, then clashes again in '67, near war situation in '86, '87, then clashes again last year. So the Chinese make no, mourn the fact that their interests are supreme for them, and they're not interested in peaceful relations with anybody in their neighborhood. So that is something.
Now coming to you, Dr. Kab Malik. Now we all know that there was a war between India and China in 1962, and then later on in 1965 Pakistan and India had a clash, and there were issues and there were problems. Now my point is that, sir, it's 2021 now. look at the kind of spending the Indians have as far as their defense is concerned, aim to become not the regional hegemonic player, I would say becoming a superpower. This is what the Indians believe, because obviously at the end of the day, second largest population, but perhaps a lot more needs to be done and they need a lot of time. But so looking at the current equation in the region, the formation of Quad, the formation of AUKUS, the kind of money they plan to spend, and the kind of encountering China's strategy that seems to be there in the South China Sea. But sir, preparing India in the long run to counter China, that is their objective, perhaps with the Western support that seems to be there. But sir, one important point, and that is, will India do it? What if they don't do it? And what if they do? Your take.
I think that it's a very complex situation, and it's very difficult to announce exactly what's going on because much of it's behind closed doors. However, we get an understanding by what's going on by trying to read and understand and appreciate the global realities as they are and the directions that particular countries take against each other. And this is what I try to do. So my take on it is that you can't always listen to what the governments are saying about each other in a conciliatory manner, whilst it also preparing for the worst as they see it. I think that every particular government sees the other government as a potential threat, especially when they challenge global power. And this is what the West thinks that the Chinese are going to do. Given the fact that China is rising so fast economically and will surpass the United States in the next decade or two in many other ways as well. I think the United States, as well as the Western allies, are very much hesitant and apprehensive about the potential threat that China faces. But this is a potential threat, and it's not really in existence at this moment in time in real terms. I think it's more a preparation, and the AUKUS, as well as the Quad, all these institutions, multilateral institutions that are being developed by the United States with other parties, for example, the Indians and Japanese, the Australians, the British, in various different ways, are there to be able to counter the Chinese rise. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The issue here with India, however, is that they've always had this underlying feeling of non-alignment since partition and since their independence. And I think underneath the politics that is happening within India, there's still a feeling of apprehension that they're going to go too far into the U.S. Influence, the sphere of influence, in essence, and they may not have that much or that degree of independence of action in the future when they're roiled up in a potential conflict with China, which they will have to act upon because they are allies. The way that balance of power systems work is that allies, in particular set of powers who are in agreement with each other about a potential situation that occurs with another set of powers, may be forced to fight a conflict, even though they don't actually want to, because of the agreements that are made, because they have long-term implications. And I think that India is very hesitant in this in real terms. There's been a lot of talk about it. And I think that India, in essence, wants to feel that it's independent and wants to have its own future in its own hands, as it has done for centuries, except for when it was colonized. Problem here is that the world doesn't wait for what other countries want. The superpower in charge of the world at this moment in time wants to maintain its power. And in doing so, will try to galvanize support within India, and has been doing so successfully to a large degree, to counter the rise of China. And the border issues are just one tiny aspect of that. There are much more geographically pronounced and significant issues in the Indian Ocean, for example, keeping the Malacca Strait open, having access to trade. influencing countries around Africa on the Indian Ocean and the littoral states on the other side, on the eastern side of the Indian Ocean. India has an inherent interest in trying to control this. In fact, India is also trying to push the idea that it wants total control of all seas around its borders, coastal resources within 1,000 miles, which goes against, obviously, the Law of Sea Convention 1982. However, having said that, it is in a particularly vulnerable position as well. I find that India's best options are to have a certain form of bilateral engagement with the Chinese to resolve any potential issues. Now, if you find that the major issue between India and China is that border issue in eastern Ladakh province or that region in the Western Himalayas, then if they can resolve that, you may find there's a shift. As Mandeep was saying, there could be a shift in the future towards India having lesser relations with the United States because it feels that it may be pushed into a significant conflict, which could be devastating for both countries. And I think that the United States has used other countries to engage in its own operations and conflicts for its own benefit. And India is another party to that. However, that relationship that it's been building with the United States over the last few years is becoming more and more.
I'll get back to you on that, but so let me also engage Brigadier Saab here now. Brigadier Saab, a couple of very major developments. I mean, we have seen what would happen in the area which we call Ladakh or the eastern Ladakh, or perhaps along certain other bordering area between the Indians and the Chinese. Now, when you talk about these two forces, sir, well equipped, well trained, on the border, ready for any action. I'm not saying that India can attack China or the Chinese will attack India, but sir, vulnerability is always there. You know, when you talk about the capability of a country, that takes time, and we understand the kind of capability the Chinese have, or perhaps the Indians also have a lot. But sir, the intentions can change overnight. You know, there comes some sort of a support or a telephone call from somewhere, and you know, some sort of a misadventure. Now, my only fear for the region is that Americans, as I earlier mentioned, sir, that they have never fought any war on their own soil except for the War of Independence. And then there was this one attack which we call the attack on their southern fleet, in which almost 3,000 people died, and later on a similar number of people died in 9/11 attacks. What was the reason? That is a separate chapter, sir, because that is so debatable, just like the landing on the moon. But my point now is, sir, that do you think that the Americans now, since they really want the Chinese, you know, to be contained or put a check on their growth, South China Sea's destability is one challenge, sir. That is why the Chinese are looking on the western side. CPEC, because creating a problem in Pakistan suits the Americans as well as the Indians. Instability in Afghanistan also suits them, so that there is no energy corridor, there is no, again, sort of an OBOR idea or BRI as they call it. And then on top, sir, when we talk about three nuclear powers almost connecting each other, and the main connection, to be very honest, is Kashmir, if you look at it.
Yeah, the Himalayan giants there.
The Himalayas. My question, sir, is very simple, and is that at some stage, if India plans for a misadventure, because the way they are looking at it, the way they are sort of getting themselves energized, what sort of a message is it for the regional countries, number one, and especially for the people of India, sir, whom I really like, because most of the Indians are very decent people. But there are certain factions which are extremist, and they are very obvious as well. But it seems that very few are controlling the masses, and that is something very unfortunate for the region. And perhaps that could lead or trigger something that is going to go beyond the control of the Western world and of the region, sir. Because once one bullet is fired, there is no stopping. You yourself, you have served in the forces, and you know it better, sir. So that kind of a situation where the Americans can support their military industrial complex, keeps on working, keeps on generating money, and do whatever eventually they can do in the region, sir. Your take?
Actually, in this big game, which is being played now in Asia and especially around China, and Pakistan being a neighbor of India as well as China. So, of course, it has got its geostrategic importance, and at the same time, it is a road towards the connectivity, especially to the energy corridors. Once we talk in that perspective, see the Indian history. Previously, they were milking the Soviet Union cow, and all sort of weaponry was given to them, and especially the vetoes in the Security Council on the Indian side, which came from the Soviet side. So, Pakistan was at that time, of course, on the side of the Americans, and all those CETO agreements were there. But India was on the one side non-aligned, third world country leader, and on the other hand they were milking the Soviet Union cow on the weaponry and on the support, friendship treaty. Second thing is now they want to, because that particular source has dried up, so now another source they have found, and that is the American cow. They want to milk it. India mindset, Nazi mindset, will never slaughter the cow, they will milk it always, because it is against their dogma. That is one. Second thing is that once this bulwark is complete and they are being armed from teeth to tail with all sort of sophisticated weapons, the way the agreements are taking place, the nuclear agreement, second is the BICA agreement,
yeah.
and third is this Quad which is coming. So, three of strategic nature agreement. More so, America has also shown its cards to Pakistan and China that they will be revisiting the policy they have already revisited. India is a strategic partner and Pakistan is just being engaged, and China is of course now their enemy. So, the lines have been already drawn. In this drawn line, if India for a certain period could milk the American cow and the Western cow and get this nuclear submarines, plus these are interoperability in the BECA, all sort of intelligence, satellite
intelligence sharing, you name
system,
it, use of the bases and everything. Yep.
Logistics and everything. So, naturally, once the time will come that America will be using it, the way they ran out from Afghanistan, they will be running out from the Americans.
Sir, if you look at the American history, sir, this is not the first time that has happened.
This is a double jeopardy which is being played on the American. One, as you see, the Indian policy is always to remain a spectator. They were a spectator in Afghanistan.
But they won't remain a spectator in this case, sir. They'll be the major players.
No, that's what you pointed out, that if a misadventure or miscalculation occurred on the Western side, that is Pakistan, or on the Chinese side.
So then one more question.
So
why is there so much of urgency of getting new weapons, like for example the way they got Rafales, right? And then more weaponry from USA, perhaps F-23s, the new version of F-16s or F-21s, again another version, or looking at the kind of technology they want to have in India so that they can manufacture everything inside India, or Tejas, or the kind of support they're getting in terms of BrahMos from the Russians, or S-400. And, you know, there's a long list. The point is, sir, basically that is too much for Pakistan. I mean, the way the Indians are preparing. Obviously, we have always
there is no conventional
comparison. Absolutely, but when it comes to, you know, to a level where, you know, one has to take a decision, we all know, and we have been very clear, and we understand what we have to do. But sir, the urgency of the Indian military men at the top, General Basit, their naval chief, their army chief, their air force chief, they are in a hurry. It seems that they are in a hurry to occupy whatever they can, occupy whatever they can buy, whatever kind of military assets they can have, you know, over there. Primarily, they believe that, you know, it's about the Indian Ocean, and as it is said that whoever controls the Indian Ocean controls the world, so it's not a joke. So that is where the problem seems to be, and the other problem seems to be again another sea, there is South China Sea. One is going to be handled by the AUKUS group, one is going to be given to Indians in the form of Quad. Now, what is that supposed to mean for the region, sir?
Actually, you see, India has got its own aim. Number one is the NSG. They want to be a member of that. They want to enter into that club